All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dina, would you please call roll?
Okay, Lisa Diaz-Nash,
Present.
Elizabeth DeWinter,
Here.
Dr. Lester Chin,
Here.
Don Hill,
Here.
and Rodlin Harris.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to proceed to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. If discussion is desired, that item may be removed and considered separately. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar? Hearing none, then may I please have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I so move.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Rod. So Dina, could you please call the roll? And you're now on mute.
Thank you. Don Hill, what is your vote?
Aye.
Rodlin Harris, what is your vote?
Aye.
Lisa Diaz-Nash, what is your vote?
Aye.
Elizabeth DeWinter, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Dr. Lester Chin, what is your vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to public comment. Persons wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may submit to the recording secretary a request to speak form. State law prevents the board from taking action on any matter not on this agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for further review. Dina, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak?
No, there isn't.
Okay, then let me close public comment. Thank you very much. So we're moving on to old business. And the first old business is to rotate library officers and conduct the annual rotation of officers for the upcoming fiscal year beginning July 1st. And James, are you raising your hand?
No.
Okay, would you like to say anything? No?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I sent Lisa a card, which I don't think it has obviously has not arrived yet. But I sent her. It has?
Yes.
Oh, you have it. Good. So I sent Lisa a card of gratitude, expressing my gratitude. The past year of working with Lisa has been a pleasure. I have really come to respect and trust Lisa, not just as a very thoughtful civic leader, but as a professional advisor and confidant. She gave me a lot of things to think about, a lot of different ways to look at things from different angles. And I always felt that she was primarily interested in me helping the library to succeed and do what it does best. So unfortunately, we can't be in person where we could give you a bottle of wine or a nice some cookies or a cupcake or share something like that, but take this symbolically. Just to say thank you so much for your service, Lisa. I know that Liz will be stepping into the new role, and I look forward to being just as fruitful and just as successful.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. And I feel the same way about everybody on the board. I mean, I have certainly learned a lot being president. Liz, you're coming in as an experienced president, so I'm sure you will have smooth sailing going forward. But I think we have all worked incredibly well together. And as I said to Lynn the other night at the Library Foundation board, I've been on many boards where there isn't as much collaboration, there isn't as much listening, there isn't as much support. So when I see it, I really want to remark on it and thank everyone, because we all are here because we love the library and love all things library, for the expanding definition of what all things library is. but how we do it together and how we support James has just been a pleasure to me. And I thank you all so much. And James, I am just so excited to see how you have grown in the past 12 months. You have just, I mean, you were always an accomplished professional and knew your subject matter cold, but you have demonstrated over the past year that you're able to handle human as well as issues between the binders. And it's been a wonderful journey, and I look forward to all the things we're going to do together now that our library is opening up. And I look forward to an exciting year with all of you, and to Lynn and her colleagues being incredibly successful and continuing to raise all the money they do and all the community support they do, because that is the foundation upon which all this grows. So thank you all very much. And unless there's someone else who wants to say anything, I guess I would make a motion that Elizabeth De Winter be nominated to become the next president of the Library Board of Trustees.
And I will second that motion.
Thank you, Trustee Hill. So Dina, could you please do the roll?
Okay, Lisa Diaz-Nash, what is your vote?
Definitely aye.
Don Hill, what is your vote?
Definitely aye.
Elizabeth De Winter, what is your vote?
Aye.
Dr. Lester Chin, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Rodlin Harris, what is your vote?
Aye.
Hey.
Aye. Definitely aye. Definitely aye.
Very good. You can give him all the extra work, Lou. Okay, that's good. So now we get to elect or nominate a vice president. And as most of you know, because you've all, except for Rod, have been on the board before, in the past, the tradition was that the secretary would become the vice president. But because in the past year, our secretary position was eliminated as we came into alignment with the City of San Mateo Boards and Commissions structure, we've done a little bit of research and have come to the conclusion that it makes most sense from a president perspective that the person who was vice president, farthest back, I guess is the right way to put it, but should be nominated to become vice president again. And that would be Don Hill. So that would be the point under discussion, but I thought I would open it up to everyone for discussion if anyone has any different method or suggestion as to how to approach this, given that the library or the secretary position has been eliminated.
I would just say that I very much support Don Hill being vice president.
Great, thank you. So if there is no one else to make a comment, I would once again make a motion that Don Hill become the vice president of the San Mateo Library Board of Trustees for the next fiscal year. And do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, incoming President De Winter. So Dina, could you please take the roll?
Okay, Lisa Diaz-Nash, what is your vote?
Once again, a definite yes.
Elizabeth De Winter, what is your vote?
Aye.
Dr. Lester Chin, what is your vote?
Aye.
Don Hill, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Rodlin Harris, what is your vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, incoming President De Winter and incoming Vice President Hill. Bravo. And don't worry, we're going to have that wine and cookies no matter what.
Sounds good.
Yes, yes.
Well, I do hope we'll get to meet in person at some point before too much longer.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we'll talk about that needs to be discussed in an upcoming meeting. I know that the city council has recently decided to provide the option again for them to start meeting in person. It's still something that they're working out. So in a way, we're looking at them to see how they work that out. They're going to do some sort of dual meeting, but I think it's something that we'll need to discuss and work out in one of the next couple of meetings, because I do think we will be eligible to meet in person probably next month.
Okay.
Great way to start the year.
Mhm.
Oh, super. So let's move on to the library's policy for release of information concerning library patrons. And I guess that's over to you, James, to give us an update on what you recently
Sure.
discovered.
So at some point during this, I'm going to show my screen just to remind people of the recommended changes that I presented, as well as those things that were recommended to me by board members to include as far as clarification. When we last dropped off on this issue, board trustee Chin had a question, as well as trustee Lynn Harris had a question about this issue of sharing statistical information and why that was exempted from something that library patrons could opt out of when signing up for a card. And so, I did a little research on it, but it should have been immediately obvious to me. But, sometimes you have to ask the question to go, oh yeah, duh. So, I asked Mary Kwan, who gathers the stats. I checked with a couple other people in circulation technical services, discussed it with the deputy city library. And what I reached was that the reason that that is included is obviously because we keep statistical anonymous statistical usage stats. And those are sort of generic, like, how many people walk through the door. We don't know exactly who they are, but we know when our gates are working as they should, which they have been for a while, that a certain number of people walk through the door, or a certain item has been checked out or requested a lot, or, a certain, we've issued a certain number of cards. All of those things fall under the statistical aspect of our data collection. And when I spoke to Mary Kwan, who's been with the library for 17 years, she compiles the statistics every month. She just, said very succinctly that she couldn't compile those statistics that we share every month if we didn't collect that anonymous data. We could not do things that we do perennially, such as say how many card holders we have, how many new card holders we have, how many ebooks were checked out, things of that nature. We would have to cease doing all of that if we no longer collected the anonymous statistical data. The other thing that I was asked about, was if people could opt out. And I checked with a representative from Plan. I shared some of the information that they provided as far as how they provide protection. These are California state laws of patron privacy. And what they said was the opt-out option, to quote, was they gather possible, because as he said, anything is possible, but it would be extremely difficult to administer. It would be something that they would have to try to make up specifically for us, because we would be the only library in PLS that didn't collect this sort of data. And to be honest with you all, I don't know of any public library that does not collect some anonymous statistical data, because otherwise they would not be able to gather the data that's necessary to maybe improve their services, to say maybe we need to get more copies of a book because we have 100 holes on it and we only have 2 copies. Maybe we may need to do something like trim a database that we are spending thousands of dollars on per year, but only 50 people looked at. We would need to be, we wouldn't be able to do that unless we gather some anonymous statistical data. So it is my recommendation, and I want to put forth the document again so that you can see it. it is my recommendation to put forth the document with the suggested edits that I have highlighted. And as far as allowing patrons to opt out of anonymous statistical data, I just honestly don't see any way that we could do that without basically saying we're not going to collect any statistic at all. And that would make us essentially fumbling in the blind. I'm fumbling around the darkness, or just using our instincts to say, well, we think we need more of this or less of that. Because if we don't have any data to know usage patterns, it would be impossible to make informed judgments on that. It would be impossible to do an annual report that included any stats. It would be impossible to provide a monthly statistical report to you all. So before I show the document, I open the floor, of course, if anyone has questions, concerns, want further clarification, or disagrees.
Are there any questions first? Lester? Yes.
Thank you, Director Moore. I also had another question about like vendors, third-party vendors, the library deals with, such as Hoopla. Are their policies in alignment with ours?
So let me ask, did you read the document that I shared from PLS? Okay, so I sent out a document.
Clearly,
Right,
I did not. So I apologize for not doing my reading. That's not.
That's
fair to
okay,
you.
because I think it answers that. I think that their policies are. I think that so. PLS their IT department is called Plan, and I can never remember exactly what it stands for. But they act as our intermediary as far as brokering deals. One of the main reasons we are in PLS is because it saves us money to pool resources with other small peninsula libraries in order to purchase certain databases, purchase security gates, etc. So the simplest answer to your question is that yes, they do, because our policy is based on California state privacy laws. PLS's policy is based on those same laws. So when I contacted Faroud Farik, who is the head of IT for PLS, he supplied me with their policy as well as the vendor information that they make each vendor sign in order to do business with us. Each vendor agrees that in order to do business with PLS, they cannot collect, what's the opposite of anonymous? They cannot collect specific name data. They cannot collect any data that goes against California state law. And I'm pretty sure that I forwarded that document, but just in case, I will double check. I know that I did forward those messages, but I'm not sure if I included that exact, if I included PLS's exact policy, which they are revamping, but I am 99% sure that I did.
James, was this the non-disclosure agreement?
Yes, there was a non-disclosure agreement, but
there was something
okay.
else.
But I think I also shared PLS's policy too.
The policy, okay.
Yes, but their policy is pretty much based off of the same legal framework that our policy is, which is what are the state laws? And they are vehemently committed to it because we are. And, but if you're uncertain about it, we can provide it again and let you take a look at it.
My apologies.
No problem.
I reskimmed it, so like I said, it must be the jet lag from the travel. So
no problem. So
okay, no.
Okay.
All good.
All right. So let me, if Dina, can I share this document once more?
I see a question on her face.
Yeah, I do too. That's okay. So let's see. Share screen, got it, okay. So I'm thinking you all can see my screen now, correct? Okay, so the highlighted areas in yellow are the recommendations. So from the previous policy, I added this thing called patron use records because that was in the new law, that was the updated law that was provided to me by Assistant City Attorney Bahar Abduhali. And one of the things, I believe it was, it may have been Lester, it may have been Rod, was to add a definition of patron use records. So down here, you can see I added the definition of patron use records to be, they include written or electronic records that identify the patron's borrowing information or use of library resources, including database search records, and any other personally identifiable information, requests or inquiries. So that would be different than the previous policy. Also, previously it had said, I believe here, California, that San Mateo Public Library, it is a policy of the San Mateo Public Library to protect the privacy rights of all individuals by only disclosing such records to persons acting within the scope of their duties in the administration of the library, that would be staff, pursuant of written authorization by the individual to whom the records pertain, that would be the patron themselves, or court order. So this was slightly changed because the previous policy had said by order of the California State Supreme Court. And Bahar instructed me to just make that by a court order because that was the new updated California law. So in essence, the policy remains largely unchanged, except to add patron use records, to define what patron use records are, because registration as well as circulation records are both defined in the second paragraph. So we want to define them all, and to specify that it does not have to be an order from the California Supreme Court, but by any recognized official court order. Let me know if that makes sense to you all. If it doesn't, I'm glad to clarify more. If you are ready to vote on this, or if you need more information or time to consider it.
Are there any additional questions from the trustees? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Oh, Trustee Lynn Harris, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No,
If everyone could use the raise hand function, that'd be
yes,
easier.
my apologies,
No worries.
President Lisa. I just have one, it's a minor thing. When I first read this, James, specifically your addition of the definition of patron use records, in the final line there, as I read it initially, as it says now, and any other personally identifiable information, requests, or inquiries. Would it be clearer if there were a comma after information? So it would be any other personally identifiable information, requests, or inquiries, because I first read it as information requests.
You are, wait a minute, identifiable information.
You just did it, yeah.
Yeah, I got it, but you know what? Information request is a term. So I think we should do information, comma, information requests.
Okay.
Or unless we just want to put information, which would cover information requests. But information request is intentional because, one of the main concerns is, is that, obviously our patrons come to the library and they ask for assistance finding information. Sometimes they ask for really quite personal information. You have people who may be dealing with a cancer diagnosis and they want a lot of help finding information on that, but obviously they want that to be confidential. So that would be considered an information request that we are bound and committed to keeping private for them, other than the librarian working with them to help them find it. So that would be an example of an information request.
Sure.
So I think you pointed out something that is quite relevant, Rod, and I think it is better by adding information requests, or inquiries. Comma. Oh, second comma. Maybe a comma here.
There we go. We love our commas. Are there any other questions from the trustees? Seeing none, Dina, do we have any?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did have a question.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't see that. Thank you.
That's okay. So James, my question is, do the librarians keep records of information requests and inquiries? Do they keep permanent records?
No, they do not. And an example of the only time that a library staff, a library reference staff, or a circulation staff might keep records of information requests, and they still would be anonymous, would be as if some sort of survey was done to improve service. We've never done anything like that at San Mateo, but I've heard of other libraries doing this. And that would be an example. I know at least one library director who wanted to improve service. So he had his staff for a defined period of time keep track of the sorts of questions that were being asked of staff. And I think they did use specific language without naming the patrons. And I'm trying to remember what he was trying to identify, but I think it was meant to say, okay, let's look at the sort of questions that we're getting. Do we need more resources put someplace to help with this? Do we need an FAQ? It may have been related to the pandemic. Do we need an FAQ so that we could save people time? But that's the only example that I've ever heard of where there was some sort of record kept of the sort of questions that were being asked by patrons, and they were anonymous, but I think the language of the patrons, or maybe he made categories. They probably made categories. Like, for example, if you know someone is going to ask someone asks you a personal question about cancer information and cancer resources, I think in a case like that, you would protect anonymity by saying, do the questions fall into this or that category, like a health question or a relationship question. So at the San Mateo Public Library, and no other library that I've worked at, have I ever seen a library collect records of specific patron questions. The closest that I've seen is to track the type of questions that patrons are asking and to protect their anonymity by making several broad categories. And you could just basically check off and say, got 10 questions under health today, 10 questions under marriage and relationships or family matters, but never specific questions. I've never seen that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Chen.
Okay, two questions. One prompted by Trustee DeWinters, and one's really a suggestion that's going to masquerade as a question. Director Moore, the Ask a Librarian feature that's available through the website, aren't there potentially records kept of those text form inquiries?
Of those text form inquiries?
Yeah, because you type like a little text
yes.
form into the website, right? So like.
Yes. So I would need to, so here's what I would say. I am very, very confident that just like every other record that we get, that they are promptly destroyed after they are answered. But because I've never had to answer this question, I've never looked into it specifically. So in order to give you a specific answer on the details of how they are destroyed, I would need to look into it, and I'm glad to do it. But I do know this, that there are no permanent records being kept of those questions.
Okay. I mean, I'm actually not asking you to look into it.
Okay.
I'm just pointing out that, like, if you agree there's some potential, we might also just be more expansive in the policy and just cover that potentiality and kind of save you the trouble of doing more research.
Well, I will leave that up to you all, because it's just a matter of me adding a sentence or something like that. But I personally think that would fall under information requests.
Yep, I agree. I think
And
it's helpful to
so-
have information requests spelled out.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think that's something that I could quickly amend and provide a definition of information requests. But I will tell you this, I'm as confident as I can possibly be without having it right in front of me that that is something that we promptly destroy, and that
Okay.
we do not keep those sort of records.
Okay. My second question is, like I said, it's more of a search. Like, what do you think about adding the word anonymized? Like, given your earlier discussion about the statistical reports, what do you think about adding the word anonymized in front of statistical reports, just to kind of make it clear to patrons that it's nothing individualized, but it's like kind of like aggregate and anonymized?
I think that's a small step that could help to clarify for patrons, and that it wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
So
Other questions?
since we have it before us, to the extent,
Higher up on the third paragraph.
okay,
First line of the third paragraph, 2/3 to the right. Over the North Star by morning, or whatever the Peter Pan quote is.
let me see, the confidentiality of library circulation records does not extend to anonymous statistical reports? Or,
Anonymized.
okay, anonymized. Oops, let's see. And I will highlight that just to keep track. Okay, anything else?
Trustee Chen, are you finished with your questions? I think yes?
Yes.
That was thumbs up.
Okay, great, great. So any other questions from other trustees? Dina, do we have any questions from the public? No?
Well, James, let's see, I'm not seeing any questions. I just don't have the view of the public.
All right, I'm trying to get rid of my screen. Okay, stop share. Boom. Thank you.
Okay, no questions.
Okay, great.
No attendees, yeah.
So if we go back to, oops. So I guess my one comment is when there was the question of should we tighten up information requests to make it more clear what we're talking about. I think Trustee Chen mentioned that. I would recommend not doing it, because the more you tighten up something like information requests and say that includes ABC, we're bound to forget something. So I think leaving it at informational requests, the broader terminology would make sense. And Trustee Lynn Harris talked about commas. I had one comment grammatically, just to have parallel construction in the policy, James.
Okay.
Okay, where you say the term patron use records include. The two prior things, it's circulation records include and registration records to include. So I think if we just said patron use records include.
Okay,
that would
will
just
do.
be parallel.
Okay, so get rid of the term.
Yeah, and then you would have to get rid of the S after in includes and make it just include.
Okay. Capitalize P, get rid of the S. That update has been made.
Excellent. So any other comments from the trustees before I call for a motion? No? Okay, then could someone make a motion to approve the policy for release of information concerning library patrons with the recommended edits?
With Director Moore having done a lot of hard work in answering our questions, I'm happy to make the motion to approve the amended policy with the edits as he showed on the Zoom screen.
Thank you very much, Trustee Chen. May I have someone second the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Trustee Hill. So Dina, could you please take a vote?
Okay. Trustee Dr. Chen, what is your vote?
Hi.
Trustee Hill, what is your vote?
Hey.
Trustee Diaz-Nash, what is your vote? Or Chair Diaz-Nash, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Trustee De Winter, what is your vote?
Aye.
And Trustee Lynn Harris, what is your vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for a good discussion. So we're going to move on to the COVID-19 progress report on full restoration of library operations, a topic we
Okay.
are all looking forward to hearing, James.
Okay, so, not a lot has changed materially except that we made the announcement on June 15th that beginning next Tuesday, we will be at 75% operation at the branches and the main library. And what that'll look like is right now we're open 4 hours a day, 6 days a week at Main. We will go to 7 to 8 hours a day, 7 days a week at Main. Well, we'll go back to our regular hours on Sunday, which is just 4 hours. Most days will be open from 10 to 6 or 11 to 7. So we'll alternate to have an evening. I think that's 2 days a week. We'll have 11 to 7. 2 days a week will be 10 to 6. At the branches, that means that the library will be open 2 days a week, 10 to 4, and 2 days a week, 2 days a week, 11 to 6. So hold on. 2 days a week, 11 to 4, 2 days a week, noon to 6. So that is what we will do starting July 6th. However, we have set September 1st as the deadline to be returned to full 100% return to services. My instructions from the city manager are that to take the time that we need to get to 100% full return to services, but that if we can get there before September 1st, that we should do it. And so the instructions for the management team is if we can get to 100% return to full service by early August, then we will do it. Right now, the biggest hindrance to a 100% full return to service are, for example, we don't know exactly what the 3Bs is going to decide. I'm in discussion with them. Previously, they had said they are not looking to return before 2022. Now they're interested, but there are some things that we still have to work out, such as repairs to the and replacement of equipment at the cafe, things we probably would have been much easier to do last year, but they weren't interested at that time. So it could be 2022 before 3Bs decides that they want to return, if they decide, and it is an if, because they have a main operation downtown, and their owner has said that he wants to wait and see. The other main thing is, and this is a central thing, is staffing. In order for us to get to 100% return to services, we have calculated that there are a minimum of 6 per diem positions that we need to fill between now and September. We can open up before then and expand, but we will be really stretched. So as you all may have recalled, we, like almost every library, left a variety of positions open during the pandemic. About 14 per diem positions were left open to save $130,000 minimum for the city. Plus, we were also told not to fill positions if we didn't absolutely have to. As a result of that, we were able to come in well under budget. We were able to operate fine during the pandemic because a lot of our services were not occurring. But what it does mean is, in an effort to reopen, that we, like numerous libraries, like I'm told Berkeley is dealing with 25% vacancy. We have vacancies that cannot quickly be filled. And so we are looking to fill those vacancies quickly. We may be able to bring some on-call people into scheduled per diem hours. We may be able to extend some hours for already per diem people and give them some extra hours. But according to the analysis done by Rakshana and what she's recommended to me and what I'm recommending to the city manager, is that we have about 6 key positions that we need to fill. We've brought a number of people back, but we still have about 6 key positions that we need to fill to comfortably and sustainably return to 100%. We don't expect that we'll fill 6 positions between now and September, but if we feel that we are in a good position that they will be filled, or we have the green light, then we think we can go forth and return to 100% operations and move some hours around, give some part-time people some extra hours, but we are going to need to find some additional staff. So that is the main thing. What we'll be doing from a staff standpoint is we are scheduled to start moving furniture back into place. We will, by next week, have a return to 3 hours on computers for patrons per day. And the things that will not immediately be returned to normal, and this is just because of logistics, based on the supervisors who run those areas, is that we have a number of people who are getting recertified for their to do passport services. So we have to give them time to get recertified before we can reopen the passport services. The admin team has said that they are not ready to, they're not set up to allow the public to right now begin reserving the large community rooms, but should be by early August and definitely by September. But some of that is just dealing with an adjustment that they made to the reservation system. I believe a new vendor that they are trying. And some of that is just getting, I guess, just getting themselves situated again to where they can keep track of those, safely keep track of those reservations. And they also just felt like, I think because up until very, very recently, there just was no certainty that, you know, who we could have in the room, what the conditions would be under which they could be in the room. So there was a need to wait. They felt a need to wait on their part, and I agree with it. Another thing to keep in mind is that the city, as well as the county, are requiring at all city and county locations that people still have to wear a mask, employees and visitors. And that is really just trying to safely implement the ending of a mask mandate. And they've just told us, we will let you know. And it's anticipated that that will likely occur in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But as it stands, one of the things they're doing is trying to get a record of how many staff have been vaccinated and you cannot mandate that if you're a public entity. It has to be voluntarily shared information. So trying to get information on how many staff have been vaccinated to see whether or not in non-public areas, if they can remove their masks. And all I know is from our end, we have to wait for instructions from the city manager's office. And I imagine that he's waiting from instruction from county leadership as to when we can lift the mask mandate. Looks like there's a question from Liz.
Thank you. Yes, Trustee DeWinter.
Hi, yeah, I thought I saw a headline, I think today, that San Francisco was going to require all staff to have the vaccine.
I saw that too. And my understanding, every conversation that that hit me by surprise. Every conversation that I've had with the head of our human resources, as well as other department heads, because we've had some pretty regular discussions about this. The last discussion was last Wednesday, was that public entities could not do that. However, I saw the same headline that you saw today. I don't know if San Francisco's city attorney did some research and discovered that there is an option or a loophole that allows them to do that, and if that will set a precedent for other cities to be able to do it. The best I can tell you, Liz, is that there's been so much uncertainty created by the pandemic, and that there are legal issues, employee safety issues, and public safety issues that are being looked at that I don't think had to be looked at before, and that it literally means that city manager's office and our human resources department are reviewing questions and options that the day before, sometimes on a day-to-day basis, either become clear when they were not clear the day before, or they've been updated, or they've been changed. So I would gladly look into the San Francisco thing, but I didn't have time to do it because I just saw it today. But all I can tell you is that everything I've been told and the forms that have been sent out make it very clear that it is voluntary for staff at San Mateo to share their vaccine status.
I'm actually happy to hear about the mask mandate, because I know for children, especially using the children's room, under 12 can't get the vaccine. So I think it's good to keep the masks on, particularly in that part of the library.
I actually agree with you. And I think one of the things that we were gearing up for was a feeling that maybe there would be a lot of pressure put on the staff to remove the mask mandate because it was being removed in so many other places. But so far that has not played out. We have not had members of the public really resisting it or challenging it. I've spoken to other library directors who have dealt with that. I don't know if it's the luck of the draw. I don't know if it's just the overall attitudes of San Mateans, but we have anticipated that there would be more people saying, why are you still making us wear these masks? But so far that has not happened.
And our risk level just went up again because of this variant.
Yes, the Delta variant.
We personally have heard of a few cases in the last few days in San Mateo. So I
don't doubt it at all, Liz, and I think it's incredibly hard. Here's what I think. I think a lot of San Mateans are mindfully cautious and pretty well informed. And they know that there's reason to be optimistic, but we're not fully out of the water. The Delta variant seems to be making the news quite a bit, and seems to be a real potential setback, So I think there are a lot of people here who are taking a cautious approach, but I also know there's a substantial number of the population, even some people on the staff, who just say they're ready to be done with the mask. These are one of the situations where I'm actually very, very comfortable and thankful for the fact that I will need to wait to see what our city manager gleans from talking to other city managers, talking with our city attorney, talking with our head of human resources, talking with the county health office, and to tell us when we can do it. Because right now we can simply say all all city locations require a mask, and that is a city rule, not a library.
Yeah, and I think when we're trying to decide whether to have next month's meeting in person or not for us, I mean, I don't know what everyone here thinks. I mean, if we're gonna have to wear masks for 2+ hours, I'd rather do it on Zoom.
So the last that I heard about that was that the city council could meet in person, but they would have to wear masks. And with the exception of one person, all people had said that they would prefer to continue to meet on Zoom until the mask mandate is removed.
Yeah.
That's the last I heard, and that was late last week.
Are there any other questions from other trustees? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Director Moore, number one, you had told us last time that you were going to try and put together a community survey of
Yes.
whether people wanted changes. Could you give us an update on that survey?
Yes, we're still going to do it. And we just decided to do it after the July 6th date. And that's the advice that, you know, my management team gave to me to consider when I was going to do it in June.
Mm-hmm.
And their feeling was that it might confuse people since the July 6 hours were not going to be our permanent hours, and that we should just focus on sharing that information. Then once people are back in the building to do the survey between July 6th and September. Still plan to do it. Still, I don't have any specific goal except to see if there's an opportunity to better allocate hours. I will tell you this, that the 8 to 9 hour is really quite slow. It has concerned me about staff and staff as well as operational costs for an hour when at any given time there's a handful of people in the building, sometimes more staff than patrons. It also concerns me that there have been a couple of safety incidents in that 8 to 9 hour. And as a longtime library employee, I know that for the people who get off at 9 and sometimes don't get home to 10 or 11, it's very hard to do that and turn around and get up and be at work at 8 or 9 the next morning. Mm-hmm. So I want to look at that and see if more people than not would say they would prefer that we close at 8 instead of 9, Monday through Thursday, if it meant that we open an hour earlier on those days, or if it meant that we stayed open an hour later on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to know, but I will not resist. And the other thing is this: most of our other peer libraries close at 8. As far as I know, all of them do. Maybe not Redwood City, but I will not resist the will of the people. If we get enough feedback from people saying, yeah, we want to keep that 9 o'clock hour, because I know it was a big deal when that hour was restored. I just don't know if people were given the option to say, maybe we could restore those hours, but at a different time. But if enough people are saying that, and that's the case, then I think we would accept it. And also, you know, part of the policy discussion that's coming up has led me to also be more careful. Lisa, you said you really complimented my knowledge earlier today, but I'm just 2 years in, and I still got a lot to learn. 2 years in this month, official. So one of the things I need to learn is, if we learn that the public would like those hours changed, if that is officially a decision that the city council would make with the recommendation from the board and us, if that is something that we will work in collaboration with the city council on, I don't know how those hours would be officially changed if we discovered that that would be a desire of the public. But that's just what we want to learn. I just want to learn if those resources would be better allocated someplace else.
Yep, and that's what you should want.
Yeah.
So you are in a learning institution, so
So I will let you know, because I suspect that we will get that survey out sometime. We would like to construct it sometime and put it out sometime in mid to late July. And I know we don't have a meeting before that time, but I would be glad to send it to you all individually and give you a chance to make recommendations or feedback before we share it, because it shouldn't be that difficult to put together. And we want it to be short and simple for the public.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
All right.
And then one last question, and you may not know the answer to this, but what are the trends behind staff's reluctance to return or decision not to return?
Sure, that's a good, that's also a good question. There were some people eligible for retirement. There were some people who took opportunities for more permanent. Every one of our per diem or on-call people, you can pretty much, with the exception, not always, because some people are perfectly glad to have 15 hours a week. They're retired from a high-powered career and they just want to come in and do something and leave. But the three main things would be, I think that we are very much impacted by a labor shortage. I think that at the lower end of the spectrum, as far as incomes go, that market is strengthening for those people looking for jobs. It's becoming more competitive. And then I also think you have a number of libraries that are in the same boat as we are. So we either had some positions that we kept open, not that people left them, probably about half. So we got 6 that we want to fill. I would say half of those are ones that we kept open because we were instructed to do so to save money. And then the other half were people who just either retired or they found a more permanent job. And like I said, I think there are some appealing, more appetizing opportunities for people, young people in particular, on the lower end of the income spectrum. There are some jobs even offering bonuses in the private sector to get workers because there is a shortage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Chen, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair Diaz-Nash. Director Moore, thank you for the update about the city mask mandate. I was unaware of that, so that was helpful information. Is that kind of indefinite, or do they set a time limit? Or, I mean, I know it's all kind of, we're all figuring out as we go. So, but I'm just curious what the current thinking is.
It is indefinite, and all I can tell you is this: is that informally, I've been told that it is something that could be lifted any day now. And obviously, something, like that, we would, oh my God, do you all feel that?
Yes, I think we're having an earthquake.
I think so too. We're due. Okay. Wow.
Okay, so.
Okay.
Everyone okay?
I'm ready to continue if you all are.
Yeah.
Okay. So no definite date has been given on that. The best I could give you is an approximate date. And this was before the talk of the Delta variant started to pick up, which from my perspective seems like it really started to pick up over the last week. So the estimate that I was given was that any day now, and probably a max of 3 weeks from last week. So probably a max of 2 weeks from the end of this week, that mask mandate would be lifted for public spaces. But that was far from a guarantee, far from a promise. It was just more like they are seeking clarity like everyone else. Some of this is tied up with OSHA guidelines, and OSHA did provide some guidelines which basically said that staff in all places have to keep their mask on when they're dealing with the public. So some of it is, so I should remove that from the table. I think the OSHA guidelines are clear. I think a lot of it is around the issue of the fact that we have a lot of children in the building under 12. So we have a considerable number of people in the building under 12 who are not vaccinated. The other thing is, I don't even think they're taking into consideration the specific operations of the library. All city locations have to follow this rule, as well as all county locations. So the best I can tell is they feel that they have some details that they still need to iron out. I wish I could give you a more definitive
No.
answer.
It's, I mean, I know I'm not, I think, well, we all would want some certainty in these times, but that's not, so that's beyond, that's for a higher power, I think. Okay, no, I just wanted to get some context around the contours of like what, just because I was unaware of this, this new mandate, I just want to get some understanding of the contours of it. But based on your description that they may lift it, you know, there's a possibility, right, that they could lift it in weeks. And last month you said that staff was concerned about mask wearing by patrons.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that if there's no citywide question, because of the library's called special situation, right? As you know, Trustee DeWinter pointed out, there are a lot of children who are not eligible to receive the vaccine, that there's still an open question about what the library should do about masks. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's very much an open question. And this, to give you an idea of the interpretive nature of these things, some of the Peninsula library systems have been instructed by their city attorney and their head of human resources that they fall under the category of like childcare location, which are still allowed to enforce the mask rule for longer and make that decision themselves because of the number of children in the building. When I presented that to our human resources director, she said that we do not. And our city attorney said that they do not see it that way. So my thinking is, and based upon what I think the tenor of my conversations with city manager's office is that if and when that guideline is lifted, that it will be something that we as a library just have to follow, that we are not exempt because of the number of children that we have in the building, and that San Mateo is not interpreting that rule as something that the library, that rule of childcare centers being able to make a decision to maintain a mask rule, they are not interpreting that as something that we fall under. So if the mask rule is lifted, it would be lifted for all city facilities, including us.
Sorry. Director Moore, just to clarify, are you saying that if the city manager and city attorney's guidance is that if the mask rule is lifted at a citywide level, we would not, as trustees, would not be able to set any policy that creates a mask rule for the library?
I am pretty sure that, yes, I would.
Okay.
I am pretty sure, based off the communication is given to me, that that is a city decision. That would be considered a city operational decision. Now, keep in mind that some of these areas are things that have not been dealt with before, and maybe people don't know exactly what category they are put into. But I do believe that that is an operational decision, and that, you know, in thinking about some of the things we talked about recently, that policy decisions flow from operational decisions, in that the city has decided we need to do this to operate. We think this is the best way to do it. We vetted it. Now we need policy clarification so that patrons and staff know how to spell it out. That's just my initial thought.
Okay.
Trustee,
Thank you.
Trustee DeWinter.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. I happened to see a few days ago. Sorry about that. That I appreciated was at Noah's Bagels, of all places. They had a sign. It was a cute sign that said "masks preferred," and it had, you know, like a smiley face with, or a face, I guess you couldn't see the smile, with a mask. So I think, I mean, we could always say we prefer, right, without having a policy, but just a sign, because I do think, I mean, as long as that's not violating a city rule, but.
Two thoughts on that. So Pancho Villas, the famous taqueria downtown San Mateo, they still have a sign up that says you cannot enter without a mask. So from that, I can read that a private entity can decide on their own. As far as whether this is policy or operational, I believe it's operational. And like I said, I believe that policy flows from the operation. However, I think this could be filed under something that will be a part of the clarifying conversation that you all are having later in this meeting, and that will be followed up on with the city manager potentially, and potentially your liaison with city council to help clarify. Because I can tell you what I think based upon what I understand on most things. And on most things, I'm pretty confident, but you know, I do agree that there is some real opacity to your roles, and that there are some things that I think I've tried to clarify or explain the best I could from my position, and that in order to get firmer explanations or firmer clarification, not just for you all, but for me, these are things that probably will need to go to your city council liaison, or to have a representative go directly to the city manager's office and speak with the city manager on clarification. Both are things that I support.
And it sounds like it also would be a good thing for them to be made acutely aware of, because when you're thinking on the city level, you're trying to think of a lot of people and you're not focused on any one particular situation. And the library with all the children does have a unique
but I
position.
have made them acutely aware of it. When we have our department head meetings, each one of us talks about our specific department concerns. And that's what we're supposed to do. I have told them that other libraries are being allowed to do this. And at least at that time, I was hopeful that we would be able to do it. And the report I got back was that they don't interpret the law that way, and that we are not going to be able to do that. We are not going to be able to maintain a mask rule based upon us being a child care center. Now, the landscape is shifting beneath us. And one thing I do have the authority to do is, if I really, really think it's going to be problematic, to go back and say, I really think you all need to, I want to ask that you all take another look at this, because we need this to operate. But I'm not at that point. I don't feel that I'm at that point. I feel that I'm at a point where we need to see how long it's going to take before they decide to lift the mask mandate and what happens in the interim. But if we get to that point, and I just think it's really going to compromise people's safety, then I will advocate for it with the city manager as well as the city attorney's office.
Thank
You're
you
welcome.
for that. Other questions? Dina, do we have any public comment?
No, we don't.
Okay. Well then, James, thank you very much. I don't believe we need to take a motion to accept your report, but we thank you very much, and please continue at this level. It's really, really helpful.
My pleasure. Thank you all for listening.
And let us know how we can continue to support you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, great. All right, well then that was a very appropriate move on to our next point on the agenda, which I've got to find my agenda here. I was writing so many notes. Clarification on policy versus operations. And the Board of Trustees will provide questions and examples for City Council guidance on whether it is a policy matter or an operational matter. And thank you very much to Trustee Chen and Trustee DeWinter and Trustee Hill for providing questions and ideas where we might want to frame some of our discussion. What I tried to do for myself, if I could take the liberty, is to try and define the context, because I know it oftentimes is confusing for people to say what's a policy, what's a program or operations. And if we can get to understanding that we all have a similar context, I think it will make the discussion a lot more fruitful and focused. So I don't know whether it's Dina or James, but one of you, I would appreciate if you could share your screen. I had just a couple of slides I wanted to share.
I think that would be Dina to administer that.
Okay, let me get those up.
Maybe can I do it? Because I am an administrator, right? So let me
Yeah,
see.
you're a co-host.
Okay, so let
and
me
then-
see.
Okay,
Let's see. Share screen, who can share? So I changed it to all panelists can share their screen. Who can start sharing screen when someone else is sharing? I will put only host. So Lisa, I think you should be able to share your screen.
Oh, okay, great. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see. Whoops.
And there should be something at the bottom, a green tab.
Yep, oh, I've got that. And I'm just trying to find, here we go. So can people see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, there we go, on the fly. So I'm not going to be able to see if people have questions. I can only see a couple of you. So if someone could help me monitor if there are any questions that come up out of this. But I'm going to try and actually move. Maybe I'll just minimize you all together so you can see the full screen. But I said to myself as part of this, how do I define policy versus program? Because in my mind, what I was seeing was a lot of questions around what is a policy that the Library Board of Trustees has an obligation, a responsibility to weigh in on, and what is a feature of a program which is within the operational concern of the head librarian, Director Moore. So when I do things like this, I went to my sources and I went to the Merriam-Webster dictionary and the Cambridge English dictionary for definitions on policy and program. And the first thing I did was look at Merriam-Webster under policy and found a rule or a plan of action, especially one adopted and followed by a group, organization, or government. So that said to me, it was something to be a guideline for the future, and that it would be even more helpful if it was adopted by a group and endorsed as opposed to just individuals. And that idea continued on with the Cambridge English Dictionary, which said a policy is a set of ideas or a plan of what to do in particular situations that has been agreed to officially by a group of people, a business organization, a government, or a political party. So once again, a plan of what to do, a set of ideas or guidelines focused on particular situations, but that had some type of an official endorsement by a group, whether it's people or business or government. Then I went and looked up program, which to me is within the operational realm. And Merriam-Webster called a program a plan or a system under which action may be taken toward a goal. So going from the theoretical to the very much real today, what do we do? How do we act in order to achieve a goal that we want to achieve? And the Cambridge English Dictionary said a group of activities or things to be accomplished. So it was even more specific as to programs were focused on implementation and details, not the what ifs or the theoreticals. So then I talked to myself and I said, well, what does this mean with regard to the San Mateo Public Library and how we look at policy versus program or operations? And for myself, and this is what I'd love to get feedback on from other people on the Zoom, policy becomes the outlines of what the San Mateo Public Library is going or not going to do or to allow. So it's really thinking across many different areas, many different options, many different groups, and saying what should the library either stand up for and endorse or say we are not going to do across multiple situations or programs. And programs fall underneath that. And so, James, in some ways, I'm taking a different flow from what you're saying. I don't think either one is wrong. But in my interpretation, programs are specific San Mateo Public Library plans that abide by these policies as guidelines, but are focused on implementing them and other ideas and services to accomplish a goal. So the goal could be to satisfy patrons. The goal could be to increase the number of children enrolled in summer programs. So that's how I really define the difference between policy, which is the outline across theoretical, what could happen, what should we do, versus programs, which are very specific and finite and focused on implementing ideas into reality in order to accomplish a goal. So number one, I'd love to see if that makes sense to people, just as a context, not saying we're going to do this or not, but as a context to really help guide our discussion so we stay focused. And I guess I can stop sharing right now. So wondering if there is any agreement, disagreement, question on trying to set a framework for our discussion. And I see Trustee Chen has his hand raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Nash, both for recognizing me for the floor, and also thank you for putting that together. I found that quite helpful, and I think directionally at a high level it makes sense to me. I think delves in the details of how it applies with examples, but yeah, I mean, I think certainly conceptually it makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, thank you for your feedback. Does anyone else have a comment? Director Moore.
Yes. So I think I think your definition gets at the crux of this issue. And I think a lot of this stems from the fact that the board charter is very old and very opaque. So yes, you are right that I do see it differently, respectfully. And that I do think that there's going to need to be some clarification from higher levels. And if the clarification turns out to agree with the interpretation that I think you and Trustee Lynn have, then we will alter our approach and work with it within that framework, of course, respecting it. But the way that I understand it, through the way I've seen things operating, is that policy, it seems to me that your interpretation, policy drives operations. And that the board comes up with the policy and that the library staff and myself implement programs to fulfill that policy. And in this context, I don't think that's what it is, but I think you all know that I'm very comfortable and humble enough to say when I'm wrong, and I just want to know when I'm right and when I'm wrong. But the way I see it is that the library, like any city department, relies on staff, professionals who are doing the job every day, who are often educated specifically in that area, and who are practitioners to come up with operational plans and schemes and directives, and that I then work with the library board to come up with policies that help us implement those operational actions. Now, in both cases, like if we decide to do something operationally, we do it with a lot of feedback from the public, weighted based upon what we're seeing, the things that we solicit, like a survey. We also do it with considerable input, questioning, research, and feedback from the board to help us justify it, to help us define it. But ultimately that we make the decision based upon our professional expertise. And that generally speaking, that decision is respected, and that the board says, what is the policy that is needed in order for this to go smooth? So I do think there is, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me turn it off. So I do think there is initially a meaningful difference in point of view on what policy means versus operation between me and what you said, Lisa, and what Lester said. I don't think that policy should be set by a civilian advisory board, and then that the library staff then has to come up with programs to fulfill that policy. I actually think it's the other way around.
Yeah, and I thank you very much for that. That was a great sort of commentary on what you're thinking. And I'm not trying to imply that, we're on high saying thou shalt, here's the 11th, 12th, and 13th commandment, and you've got to deal with it. What I was trying to do was to talk about the difference between policy and program, not the direction where one starts and where one ends, but to really focus on the fact that policies, if in your interpretation, you come up with a program about children's summer programs, and you identify that there are some policies needed, those policies are probably going to be relevant to more than one specific program. One Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 10 Zoom of kids, doing puppetry. It's going to be around how do we deal with children and Zoom to protect the fact that they're underage or something. So my point was saying that, and I certainly would not say that I would vouchsafe for my colleagues that any of us are experts in what you and your staff and colleagues do, but that what policy, forget about where it comes from in program, policy should be guidelines and should be geared toward how do you deal with a situation, even if you don't know how you're going to face it. And programs should be focused on, we want to do something specific. We want to open up a biotech library. We want to do this, we want to do that. So perhaps I misspoke if you interpreted it as saying that we should set the policy and therefore you implement. Absolutely not. You are the subject experts. You were hired to be the head librarian, we weren't. But in terms of trying to just theoretically divide policy versus program, because I think that has relevance to the examples that my colleagues offered up today. I think we have to have, hopefully, an understanding and some common footwork of what is a policy and what is a program, not which goes first. But, and because if I look at some of the examples, and we'll get to them in a bit, Trustee DeWinter had some questions on the cafe and food and drink. So and you've come to us with these before. Do we do we engage 3Bs or cafe house to run the cafe in the library? That's part of an operational program. That is nothing we should have anything to do with. But you may identify that, and you brought this to us before, that staff has a reluctance. Maybe they don't want to go back to offering food and drink in the library for a whole lot of different reasons. But you would come to us with a recommendation because of A, B, and C that we shouldn't do food and drink in the library. We would have a conversation. We would come up with a recommendation that might go to the city council. But our recommendation would be a policy recommendation about not offering food and drink, not should it be 3Bs or cafe house that actually operates the cafe. So hopefully what I was trying to get across was that policy should be applicable to a number of different situations, not just to one specific program, but it should help you so that you don't have to come running back every 3 seconds to say, here's this and here's that. But that's what I was attempting to communicate, not where
Well,
should it start.
First of all, thank you for that clarification, Trustee Nash. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that while you were president, I always appreciated that your perspective came from how do we help you all do what you've identified that needs to be done. And of course, I think most people would agree that the things that are identified as needing to be done are, based upon a lot of observation, day-to-day observation, communication, conversations within staff, feedback from the public, as well as communication, conversations, and feedback with the board. So generally when we put forth something for an operation, it has been very well vetted. The other thing I would like to say is that I looked at all of the questions that the trustees put forth, and I did do some research, and I did, write some thoughts up. I don't know if today's meeting is the time to go through it, because I know that ultimately some of these questions are just going to need to be answered and clarified by city council representative or the city manager. But what I will say is this, is that, for example, with the food rule, when we say there's no food in the library right now, that is not an example of the library staff coming up with a new policy. The policy has always been no food in the library except from the cafe. The staff got tired of policing it because it became so difficult for them to manage it that they let that slide, and they just started to allow people to bring other stuff in and eat it, and it got out of control. So when we see the fact that we're opening after a pandemic, there are heightened safety and health concerns, and 3Bs doesn't know if they want to come back, that we're saying no food in the library because it can't be from 3Bs because they're not open. And that was the original rule anyway. And before I came, staff had gotten tired of just trying to police it. So this is an area in which I would definitely want to work with the board to say, here's a rule that should be enforced. It's very hard for staff to police it. What is a realistic good policy on that? But that's something we could talk about in more detail, because I do think this is going to be a detailed, layered conversation. What I would like to state is this, is that I do believe that every member on the Library Board of Trustees is interested in getting the clarification so that they can help us operate the library the best that we can in the ways in which we've been chosen to do. And so I totally respect that. And I go into the conversation with good faith. So obviously we are going to disagree on some of the details along the way. And in some cases, it may be a nuanced thing where you just need to clarify to me. And I really appreciate that, Lisa. But we have the same goal, which is to get clarification so that we can, really work better and collaborate on how to come up with, on how to work out good policies for us to operate the library.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Lisa. Yeah.
Thank you. So Trustee DeWinter, I saw your hand was raised. It's not raised now. Are you still wanting to speak because you were the first one?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Then Trustee Chen.
Thank you, Chair Diaz-Nash. For avoidance of doubt, first, Director Moore, thank you for the fulsome and strong reaction, right? I think it helped clarify some just different interpretations of the same slides, right? We can all see the same thing, but get different things. When I said I was in agreement with Chair Diaz-Nash, it was really just on probably the one line. It was like policy sets what's allowed and not allowed. And I think Trustee DeWinter's example of the food is a good example of that, right? Like the policy is just, is food allowed in the library or not, or under what conditions? And then as Chair Diaz-Nash said, which vendor, what hours, that's really up to the librarian and staff to decide, right? And then if the feedback is like, hey, it was working 3 years ago, but operationally it's really hard to work this policy, then we amend it, right? So that's the part that made sense to me. I did not, like Chair Diaz-Nash, I did not interpret policies as setting any goals, right? It's really just like the, kind of like the out of bounds, like to use a sports analogy, right? It's just kind of like the out of bounds lines. Like this is allowed, like food is or is not allowed. It's in bounds or out of bounds.
Sure. You know what would help me, Dr. Chan, is if Lisa could pull up her definitions again, and I can take a look and show you what I was responding to.
Yeah,
This is why it's always
I'm not doubting your response, Director Moore. I'm just saying it was really helpful, right? Because we kind of are reacting to different parts.
Are you talking about,
yes. So
there's the definitions. You're talking about the second page, yes? You're talking about this page.
Go back to the first page, actually. So, a rule or plan of action, especially adopted and followed by a group. So the way I see it is that the library staff sets the plan of action. So that was something that, that was what I anchored on, which may have been an error. And then go to the second page, please, Lisa. Thank you. And let me see, policy is the outlines of what the library, San Mateo Public Library is going or not going to do or to allow. I think that's a reasonable definition, but I still am a little on the fence on it being, because that sounds to me like the library board, because when I think about what we're going to do or not going to do, to me, that sounds like our strategic plan or our work plan. And that's something that our managers get together based upon feedback from you all, based upon feedback from staff, based upon feedback and observations from patrons. And we say, these are the 3 to 5 things that we think we should focus on this year. Not dismissive, not saying, yeah, we heard what you guys said, but this is what we're going to do. But we talk about, like, for example, age-friendly cities. Saw a great presentation from age-friendly cities. Think this may be something we need to work on and make a priority. Let's talk about it. Let's use all the information we've gotten to decide on this. So that was what made me a little on the fence, because to me, and I don't want to get caught up on semantics, but we probably will, because we're working out something that's probably been years in the working out. To me, along with the library leadership team, our imperative is to decide what we're going to do based upon all those information sources, and that policy draws the parameters. We work together to decide on how to successfully do it.
So it sounds to me, and I apologize, I can't see anybody right now.
That's okay.
But it sounds to me that if I had written something, and I was thinking policy versus program, I wasn't even where things started and where we stopped to. But if there was something that was added to this, that based upon the head librarian and library staff's recommendations and plans, or something to make it clear that that you're the ones who are figuring out how to run the library, but what What we're trying to do is just as Trustee Chen said, endorse and support you with guidelines so that when someone is being obnoxious in the library, the library staff can go up to them and say, excuse me, we have a policy that says yada, da, 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 and I thank you to ABC. So that's the policy should be enabling the staff, not crimping their style. So it's just not trying to, and this is not supposed to be a final document. This was
Absolutely.
a conversation starter, and it definitely got the conversation started.
Yes, it did.
But that you would have interpreted, and this is why it's good to put things in writing, because that's when people do see things and go, that if there had been a comma after allow, and something about based upon the plans that San Mateo Library staff and head librarian have developed and recommended in order to make them successful or something. That might have, I was trying to keep it short, but I probably kept it too short.
I think you're warm, and I think that's close to how I'm seeing it. Like I said, it's our first conversation.
Yeah.
And I may need some time to ponder and think over some of these things and come back. And I look forward to us having the conversation. It probably will be an extended conversation. The way I understand it is a good part of the focus of this conversation is to help with shaping of the questions that you will go specifically to seek clarification and information on. So what I'm saying to you is, no one has spelled these things out to me in clear language, and I think they should be spelled out in the board charter, which they aren't. The board charter is very confusing. I see you, Lynn. I'm going to stop in a minute.
Oh, Don goes first, and then Lynn. Okay.
But then we're going to work out either what some of our agreement is on the definitions, or what some of the questions are that we cannot fully clarify on our own, and that we want to share with someone else to help us. And so right now I would classify that as, I think we're close, but we're not totally aligned or sure if we have the same definition.
That's not bad for a first couple minutes.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
So Trustee Hill, you had your hand raised next.
Okay, I'm probably alone out here in the wilderness, but I was not very comfortable with James' description of how things should be. Under my understanding, what he's saying, if we had a couple of staff people at our library that were very, very talented and loved dance, they could develop the idea of a dance program that the library would support. But in order to do that and get it launched, they would then go to the board and say, look, we have this great program and we need to have a change in the policy in order to support that idea. To me, as speaking as somebody who also represents the broader community, I simply don't agree with that approach. But I realize I'm probably a minority of one.
No, there's no such thing as a minority of one. It's part of a conversation. So thank you, Trustee Hill. So Ms. Esselstein, please join the conversation. We look forward to it.
So I'm here as a member of the public, but also as somebody who has a law degree and a little bit of experience. So the perspective that I wanted to say is, and James really touched on, he stepped right there, which is your charter is the most important thing to look to find out exactly what you guys are permitted to do. And if it's unclear, I think that's something that the city attorney should help you with. Because quite frankly, you don't have full authority. You found that out sort of directly most recently when the charter seemed to say that there was, a broad base of decision-making around the hiring of the city librarian. And the city attorney actually said it's not what it looks like. So my point is that this is a really important role that you fulfill, which is a representative of the local public and patron community. But that by definition does not allow you to weigh in on every single policy that might possibly affect the operations of the library. For example, you can't be telling James how to manage his staff. That's an HR decision that actually belongs to the city. And so for, most broadly, maybe there is an overlap, and it is but it's a very technical and sticky type of thing that if you want to craft something that you think everybody can live with, I would encourage you to reach out to the city and ask them for help from the city attorney's office, because I guarantee you're not the first commission to have this conversation. A lot of these charters were likely created under very different circumstances and do not contain current definitions. And that may be exactly what's required here. But you can't, I don't think, unilaterally change it either, because it's under the city's charter.
Right.
So it's a little bit, I think, embrace the conversation, because clearly the only thing that could come out of this that is a good thing, which is greater clarity about what people's roles are.
I know Trustee Chen is waiting, but I would like to quickly interject just to piggyback off something Lisa said. I have read our library charter 5 or 6 times, and I cannot tell you exactly what it means as far as what you all should do and what I should do in relation to you all. So it is unclear. I think it was written in like 1907. It says some things that are way off the mark, something like the board can select materials, which we know would make sense if you're like a one-room library and you're selecting like 20 books a month, as opposed to a large library with hundreds of thousands of items in their collection and a very complex process. Clearly, the board cannot select materials. So I personally think that the charter is at the root of our problems, and that it is completely unhelpful to me, and that I would vehemently support a conversation around how to clarify that charter, if necessary, create a new one that's more appropriate to this time. And I think that would involve the city attorney's office and other people. Sorry, Lester, if I took up too much time.
No, and all I would say is, incoming President DeWinter, I think I've given you something to do, and I'm passing it along. So, Trustee Chen, over to you.
Sorry, it always takes me a couple clicks. Thank you, Chair Diaz-Nash, or current Chair Diaz-Nash. I have a question for Trustee Hill. So Trustee Hill, I'm curious, and then I have a question for all the trustees. So Trustee Hill, I'm curious, your dance example, you said you didn't disagree, you said you disagreed with it. So I'm just curious what your, like how you would envision it. Like if you were writing the charter, like how would you imagine it developing? And again, just to better understand your position.
I haven't seen what the charter says very carefully, and I'm not sure how a charter would address my concern. But my general concern is what the library does in the community should be decided by the community as much as possible. The library staff is our agency to make possible what the community wants to have the library be. And I see the library board working in collaboration with the librarian and the staff, making making the library as strong as possible to achieve the most important goals that the community has. And a tilt towards the staff deciding on their own versus a broader process that gives a stronger role to the community is what I'm looking for. I'm not looking, and I'm not sure about language that would get at that. And I suppose maybe what I'm saying is there are many communities where the library board has a much more active role, has a more powerful role than is true in San Mateo. And I'm not suggesting that that we try to change that and become a more active library board than what exists in San Mateo, but that's my concern.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Hill. Thank you for expounding on that. And Director Moore, I think vice versa, I see your hands up, so indulge me with a quick question for all the trustees. I think going off, Ms. Esselstein's comment and your comment, Director Moore, like there does seem to be consensus that we do need to get some clarification. So I guess my question is like, how do we want to go get that clarification, right? Like what is, as Chair Diaz-Nash said, sometimes it's really helpful to see things in writing. So what is this thing in writing we want to put together as an aid to get that clarification? And so I think that's the question I want to ask my fellow trustees.
Okay, and first, I think Director Moore might have something to say, and then we can open it up to the group.
Okay. Well, I was going to wait for you all to respond to Lester, but I might as well because I'm responding to Don.
You're responding to something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually thought a lot about the questions that you all put forth. And I wrote some thoughts and responses. So Don, what I think you want is a governing board. And San Mateo has an advisory board. I don't know what the percentage is. Some libraries have governing boards, some libraries have advisory boards. And it's a matter of degree. Governing boards don't simply tell the library staff what to do because you can't hand over to, I don't think it's wise to hand over to 5 community members who are not library professionals to decide for the whole city or whole community what the library should be doing or to approve or disapprove. I just don't think that's democratic at all. And I don't think that a group of individuals, no matter how passionate they are about the library, who meets a couple hours a month, can have an in-depth, informed understanding of the resources, of how to allocate them, of patron behaviors if you're not working there every day, what programs work and what programs do not work, what things are pain points for staff and what things are not. So the best that we could come up with is to allow the staff in an advisory setting is to have a group of representatives to advise the library director based upon what they think is good for the community. Now, keep in mind, there are many thousands of people who think they know what's good for the community. And they tell us regularly what program we should do. And if we did all of them, there is no way we could do it. We'd run out of money in like a week. And they might be the only one at their program because they're not getting a global view. As a matter of fact, I often don't have an on the ground view because I'm no longer on the front line. I need to talk to staff and see what they're seeing. So the best thing that we have come up with, because I was often so overwhelmed by patrons who passionately thought that we should do a program that they thought was the best thing in the world, but they didn't know what other patrons thought, was to come up with a committee of librarians who do regular programming. They meet on a quarterly basis. We ask patrons to submit ideas either from face-to-face interactions with the librarians over the phone, or if they're really serious, to complete a short form on our website where they provide some details of what they think would be a great program for the library. We gather those recommendations on a quarterly basis. Then we have a group of about 6 librarians who regularly do programming. They put those ideas out on the table and say, let's judge them on the criteria that we think makes for the best program. And then they make those plans based upon the resources we have, based upon what their strengths are, and most of all, based upon patron feedback. If there's a program that the public overwhelmingly wants, like things that deal with social justice or things of that matter, they're hearing it from them on a regular basis when they communicate with them on the front lines. So it's not a matter of us getting together and saying, we like this, we don't like that, or we want to do this, or we don't want to do that. We are constantly evaluating ideas. I have a team of experts who evaluate those ideas because I'm no longer very good at it. And we know that of the plethora of wonderful, positive ideas that would add to this community, we can only choose a few based upon our resources and based upon staff abilities. And we just do our best to, I guess it's the representative democracy. We do our best to take all those feedbacks, all those things, and have this group really vet those ideas and then select a group of programs that they could do. Now, perhaps this could turn into a governing board, and some libraries work that way. Berkeley has a governing board. And if that's the case, I would work with those rules. But at the outset, you know, I even have a degree of humility where I say, you know what, I just don't know how to run team programs. I just don't know what is best for team programs. That's why I have a team librarian. And when someone gives me a good idea, I pass it through to her and I say, you in that committee, you in the group of teens. She works with a group of teens. They decide the team programs. They are the selection committee. I say, you and your group of teens, look at this idea along with the other ones that you're getting. And I am confident that what you all decide on is the best possible choice, because I can't choose everyone and we can't choose everyone. So I understand your frustration, Trustee Hill, but I just think that a lot of times members of the public have their very special interests, and they're not often able in a position to vet and evaluate and see if this is a widely held interest that would draw a lot of people and that we could afford. The other thing I would say is that members of the public, this is something that the city manager and I talked about. For every 1 hour program that we do, you should keep in mind that it takes about 10 hours of staff time to plan it. This is something that most members of the public do not appreciate or understand, because I wouldn't know it if I didn't work at the library. So for every program that's chosen, we're going to ask someone to spend 1/4 of their week, 1/4 of a week, planning it, setting up the vendor, setting up the speakers. And if you don't know what goes into that process, then I think it is difficult for members of the public to make an educated selection of what the best programs are. Now, we don't know better than everyone else. We do know this profession, but our staff is instructed to be humble enough to say, yeah, listen to the public, listen to the board. But then you have to use your judgment based off of your professional training to select what will be the best programming, knowing that you can't select them all.
Okay, Trustee DeWinter.
I've just been thinking, this is not a segue in any way from what you've been saying, Director Moore, but many years ago, this conversation about operational versus sort of policy, what our role was, came up. And Trustee Hill might be the only other person who would know about this. Former city manager Patterson came to one of our meetings. I don't think any of the rest of you were here, but correct me if I'm wrong. As there was one trustee at the time who seemed to want to get involved in, I would say, personnel issues. so we had a clarification made at one of our meetings. I'm sure it's documented in minutes, and it probably would have been about almost 6 years ago, because I think most of you started about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. I'm not really sure, but anyway, I would say it was 5 to 6 years ago. So that might be just of interest to look up the minutes from that. I can't be that much more specific, but so that's one issue, just that this is not a new topic. This has always been a point of confusion. And my second thought is, while it would be helpful to go to the city attorney to get clarification on any number of things, I almost feel like it would be more effective to do it on a case-by-case basis, because we will always have things that come up that don't quite fit into operational or program policy. For example, one thing that's been on my mind a lot is the Marina branch, and the building itself, the structure.
Yes.
I know this is more of a public works operational kind of thing, but I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't bring it up and talk about the safety of the building, and especially in light of what just happened in Miami. It's kind of front of mind, I think. But I don't know if that's something technically we're supposed to be addressing in our meetings.
Well, let me respond, Liz. First of all, as members of the public, technically you can ask about it, and you can certainly take steps to get clarification that that building is safe, especially we just had an earthquake.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that the city paid for a safety review of that building since I've been here, probably in my first year. And what they concluded was that the building needs to be replaced, but it is safe. But as long as we're there, the building will shift, and there'll be issues like the door not opening, etc. This was Public Works, and they paid for an outside vendor. So all I can do is go off of what they said. But I know that Don is very interested in the branches. I really think they need to be replaced to provide the best service. But that would involve some sort of capital campaign, which I would love to be involved in, or some other resource. But I agree that is a topic of concern, and that any concerned member, especially a library board member, has the right to follow up on that. And you don't have to ask my permission. I would not be offended. You have the right to say, well, this is what James told us, but I want to check with the city manager. I want to check with Public Works. I want to check with the city attorney. That is your right. The other thing I would say is, I know some of these issues have come up before, and I think there have been attempts to address them. Like, for example, I know that there was some question about library trustees or library foundation members doing programming. And my understanding was that the compromise that was worked out was to promote and facilitate the foundation, as well as library board members, taking the lead to plan 2 or 3 programs a year, if they wanted to do that, 1 to 3. The 2 programs that have occurred since I've been here have been fantastic. And we made the staff available to support and facilitate those programs. Now, the last I understand, that was a choice that was made by members of that committee to pause programming. So I think there are already opportunities for a trustee who is passionate about a program to say, this is something that I really want to do. I can get together with a group of other trustees and foundation members, and we can work on this, and the library will make staff available to support us to make it come into fruition. And from what I have seen, that has been a success. But it does necessitate the members of that committee taking the imperative to say, we are going to work together, we're going to plan programs, and we are going to do them. Because from my perspective, if you cannot put together consistently 1 to 3 programs a year, then I'm perplexed as to how it is thought that one could plan the programming for the whole library. Because that is much bigger, much more complex, much more labor intensive, and much more expensive.
Trustee DeWinter, are you finished with your comment? Yes? Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
great. And Trustee Hill, please.
Very quickly, I'll talk with James later, but his idea of what I think we should do is simply not true. I'm not advocating a change in the way the library is board is constituted. I don't believe that, but I'll talk with James later.
So, Trustee Lynn Harris, we have not heard from you. What thoughts might you want to contribute?
Well, thank you, Board President Nash. Very simply, to me, as has been said by a number of people in a number of different ways, I mean, the programs have to come kind of almost, for lack of a better term, bottom up. I mean, we are not I'm not going to speak for the other four of you trustees. I am not at the library, that often. I pay attention on and off during the month. I read in advance and so on and so forth, but I'm not there every day. I don't know about what the public wants, what the public needs. That is the job in reality of the librarian. And I'm sure it's the passion of those other individuals in many cases who work there. So when I think about, operations and programming, I defer. I have interests that I would like to see, but that has to come from those people who know that are taking the temperature every day, formally and informally, of the people that are using this vital resource. And then I always looked at, prior to this discussion, our role would be, okay, the research has come, the projects, the programs, the operations have been, for lack of a better term, been evaluated, been vetted to see what are the best. And then it's the role of the board to kind of take all that under advisement and suggest to the city librarian as to what direction we think might be best for our community. But maybe I've been naive or stupid. I just never really looked at it as though the way that it seems some of this discussion seemed, at least, to see we were thinking about going. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Trustee Hill, your hand is still raised. Was there something else you wanted to say? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. So you know what? I think this has been an incredible discussion. I think we have put some really important topics on the table. I think what every one of us has said, no matter how they've said it, is that the library board is here to support the head librarian and the staff to do what is absolutely the best thing for the residents of San Mateo and everyone else who uses the library in the 103 different ways that they probably do use the library, and some that nobody, even the librarians, have even thought of yet. So I think that's wonderful. The other thing I heard consistently throughout is we have an old, wretched document that is at the base and foundation of who we are as a board. And we have two options. We can either try and do something about that, or we can just say, oh, well, that's over there and we'll deal with everything on a one-off basis. And what I would like to suggest to my fellow trustees, to the head librarian, to members of the public, is that we make an attempt in coordination with the city attorney to start to look at our charter and and this is obviously incoming President DeWinter's call, but what are the pieces that we just know right off the bat need, like we're going to pick which books. I mean, there's some things that I'm sure are just so basic and in front of us. And let's look at that and see what we can do, and then really start to talk about what does the underlying core of the charter say? How does that relate with what we all understand our roles to be? And we have to continue to have conversations about that. But I would recommend we try and do that at the same time that we look at one-off decisions, because if we just focused on the charter, we might be talking for the next 6 months. And that makes us a very ineffective board, because the library needs us to make decisions or make recommendations on policy to keep things going, particularly now at a time when we are opening up and things are very different and people's lives have been fundamentally changed by the past year and a half. And they've maybe decided they need different things in the library, or they realize they need certain things crucially for the library. And that's going to change what Director Moore and his team do, and what we do. So, obviously it is up to the incoming President DeWinter and incoming Vice President Hill to help work with Director Moore. But I would love to see us really take that two-track to lean in, as Ms. Esselstein said, Executive Director Esselstein, or Ms. Esselstein said, to really work with the city attorney to try and deal with the fact that we have a charter that is out of date. And just because it hasn't been done since 1906 doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do something about it and lean into it. And I would be happy to help in any way that I could. But at the same time, really focus on while we're doing that, work on what are the immediate policies that we need to focus on, and situations to make Director Moore and staff's and the public's life as fruitful as possible, and make the library come back as gung-ho as possible and take on the most important roles we possibly can. And so in terms of the one-off decisions, really be as focused on what the library needs from us today, while separately we're looking at the charter and how do we update it, how do we amend it, how do we say, wow, there are some things that really need to be changed, and that will take a while. So that's my comment. I would really go for a two-track option. And I think continuing the discussion at the theoretical, which is what all of these suggestions were, may not be the most effective way of supporting the library, as I know we all want to do, and supporting the community. So with that, I will be quiet and open the conversation to other thoughts about next steps, because I think we do need to come up with next steps, because just to end this conversation, I think would not be beneficial to anybody. So I welcome other comments and suggestions. Mine has been to take a two-track approach. Are people in agreement with that? Are they offering up other opinions?
Can I make a quick suggestion?
Yes,
First of all, Lisa, I'm in total agreement with you. We still have to review policies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to pause some of them if this conversation, which looks to be extended, is going to prevent certain decisions from being made on policies. But we still do have a number of policies, in particular one that we've put off for a while, and that is deciding on fines. But I think, and so, after we approve this policy, I do plan to put forth the next policy share, or at least the recommendations for you all to choose. I think from some of my brief conversations with Trustee Chin that, and this is just my suggestion, because this is very much your decision, your idea, the best way to go about it. And I support it because I need clarification. And clarification does not mean to me getting everything the way I want it. What it means to me is some sort of compromise, and at least I know like what we've agreed upon. So I think this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Chin, is about putting things on the table, clarifying what your questions will be. And that's maybe the next step, shaping them such that when perhaps you choose a representative and you have a conversation with your city council representative or liaison to see how you can take your next steps, or arrange a meeting with the representative, with the city manager, and then bring in the city attorney. So I think you all are trying to clarify what the questions are that you want to ask. And I think that is very important, because anybody that you get an audience with is going to be very busy. And so the more time that's put into sculpting those questions and having them ready and clear for them to answer or think about or research, that is going to help with your endeavor to get clarification.
Very well said, Director Moore. I mean, I think that's, much better way of saying what my question I asked earlier, like, what is the thing we want to like get feedback on? I don't have a opinion on that, but like our liaison, Councilwoman Pappen, is in high demand at many levels. So if we do get time with her, we should come with something crisp. I think your point about representative, points to kind of like the tried and true, subcommittee approach. I think that's a good way to go about it. So maybe we don't have to figure out like what the thing is, but maybe it's just like, hey, who are the 2 of the 5 of us that are like, go hash it out, come back to. So let me suggest this. Why don't we see if 2 of us will be on the subcommittee, hash out a draft, come back to the full group, say like, hey, is this the thing that we want to go get guidance on? And then go from there. So I would suggest that as the next step.
And I guess then my question is there interest, maybe as a step after that, to even take a look at the board charter? Because if it is from 1906, I guess I would offer that it needs some updating. Yeah,
I see Trustee Lynn Harris. Let me quickly say my 2 cents. I'm personally cautious about modifying the charter because it's in the city charter. So it's kind of nifty for us, but it's also kind of laborious to update and potentially costly. So I think for me, that's almost like if we can kind of come to a like understanding and clarity without legally changing the charter, that might be a better use of city resources, since we're all kind of mining our pennies. And I guess I also want to say, like, yes, I do agree with the 2-track approach. I think there's an existing set of policies that we've all agreed are policies that we all agreed the board should look at. So in parallel with this larger discussion, like, let's go through the policies one by one, since there's no disagreement that those are policies.
okay. Trustee Lynn Harris, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, Board President Nash. The second, 2 points. The first was Trustee Chen's second point. I agree. I mean, the policies seem to be something that we should, there's kind of unanimity or great discussion about reviewing. So of course, my question was going to be about the charter, and I did not have the same specific reason for not reviewing it as Trustee Chen. My reason was more, gee, if the city librarians looked at it 7 times and it's talking about, it was written in 1907 and it says that we can, we can be responsible for getting pens and pencils and stuff. I mean, kind of what's the, is that the best use of our time? It'd be interesting to look at it and see that maybe the spirit of it, but to try to rewrite, or wind our way through the city with that might seem to be not the best investment of everyone's time, effort, and energy. Because it doesn't seem to be, I mean, if the city librarian is saying he doesn't understand it, but he seems to be running the libraries of the city very efficiently. I mean, theoretically, he could be doing things, James, all kidding aside, he could be doing things in violation of the charter. So kind of what's the point? I mean, I don't get it.
You know, Rod, if I may comment, first of all, I don't know for sure if it's 1907, but I think that's when the San Mateo Public Library was first.
Long enough ago is the point.
It's old. Yes, it's old. And second of all, I think you are right. There's no shame in me admitting that I've read this thing several times, and I don't find it as useful as a guide on what I should do and what I should not be doing. I don't find it useful as a guide on helping you all to determine what you should do or what you should be doing. So the best I can tell is that the city has decided to operate on some sort of informal but related ideas, somehow rooted in that charter, but that diverge, and that is sort of this sort of like, well, you understand what it means. And I agree with Lester. It may be really hard to rewrite it or whatever. It may just be too much. But I just have to say, I would tell this to anyone. I don't find it as a useful guide. And in some ways, I find it perhaps even more adding to confusion.
I guess I'd say that perhaps then if someone, and this is no indictment of your inability to understand it, librarian Moore. I'm just saying, perhaps though, if someone were to give us a general understanding of the themes or the tracks of the intent, maybe that might be of some benefit without, having to go so in the weeds and peel back and go 100+ years or whatever it was back. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Hill.
James, I have a question. Do you think something like a charter that's contemporary could be useful to you? Or do you think the idea is one we should just forget about? You don't need to have something that's like a modern version of what a charter could be.
Well, I'm answering out of complete ignorance, and I could be undermining myself, but I'll just give you an honest answer. Personally, I think a clearer, more modern charter would be helpful. That said, I don't know all the steps that go into creating a charter, and I think there's probably a good reason that they've stuck with this one for a long time. There's also the possibility that if a new charter is written, that you could get your wish done, or what I think is your wish. I don't want to put words in your mouth. A new charter could be written in such that the authority of the city librarian is diminished and the authority of the board is increased. And obviously, I mean, I just want what's best for the library. And I would want to be very careful about maintaining that balance, not because I want to feel powerful or just be in charge, but because I do think I have a pretty good idea and insight on the best ways that libraries should work. And I run my divisions the same way. I believe that the divisions are little versions of the library, and that the people who are hired to be supervisors of those divisions are my experts. As much as possible, I want them to use their expertise. So I would be concerned about upsetting a balance of authority and power. However, I also would like to think, and I do think this way, that the people that we have on our board, and by and large, the people who join library boards, at least in San Mateo, are most interested in doing what's best for the library and the community and the city, and not trying to run the library. And that, for me, the current charter is worse than useless, because we can limp along with it. But Rod, you didn't insult my intelligence, but I think I'm reasonably intelligent and reasonably literate. I better be. I'm a city librarian, and I've read that charter multiple times. And perhaps it's just like a lot of legal documents where you just go, what? You just read it and you go, but what does that mean? But what does that mean? So it's something to refer to help clarify what I should be doing, to help clarify what you guys should be doing. It's not helpful. And I would just have to tell the truth. It's just not very helpful. And it may be damaging. I don't strike that. It's just not helpful.
Okay, well, I think we've, incoming president,
Yeah, I just wanted to mention under the chat that I put a link to the charter. The easiest thing is to type in under find library, but that's the section, the article section.
So happy reading, everyone. Yes. So I'm going to suggest that this has been a great conversation, but it is 8 minutes to 8. And I think that actually Trustee Chen's suggestion of forming a subcommittee is quite a good one. And bringing something, the committee could bring something back to the next board meeting, and we could have a focused discussion. Or more focused. I think we focus on certain things, but we need to continue. So can I ask, would there be 2 people who would be interested in serving on that subcommittee?
Well, I have a question. Incoming president or incoming chair DeWinter, I mean, I guess, for your administration, like, are there 2 people you would ask to serve on a subcommittee?
Yeah, I would ask any of you. I mean, I really think the key is for people to have an interest in the subject. So I think it's better to have 2 volunteers or 1 if we don't have enough for a subcommittee.
Well, I sort of kicked off this whole, rabbit hole, like rattles in one hand, ask rabbit hole. So I'm happy to be one of the 2. I do think it's important. I would really very much like to have a co-pilot. I think it's just important to have a balance of views.
I would be happy to co-serve with you unless someone else would like to do it. Because I think we have different brains that work in different ways, and it might be an interesting discussion.
I can't do it in July. I could do it later, but I am interested in.
Okay, well, I would leave it to incoming President DeWinter to
why
decide.
don't we start with the 2 who are available, Dr. Chen and President Nash, DS Nash, and then we're all going to weigh in at some point because you're going to bring back to us for discussion what you come up with. So I would say then Trustee Hill and the rest of us can weigh in, whichever month that you are ready to present, if that sounds okay. Is that okay, Trustee Hill?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Okay. So let's do that.
Good. All right. Does that sound good to you, Trustee Chen?
Sounds good. Sure, DS Nash.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Well, then let us, unless, Dina, is there any public comment that I'm not seeing? I want to make sure.
Sorry, it's taken me several clicks to unmute. There is no public comment.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I think we can, we don't need to bring this up for any kind of a vote. I think this is just a next step. Am I correct? No? Okay. So let's get to the updates so that we can complete. But I would like to say thank you, everyone, for an incredibly robust, useful discussion. And this was a good example of why I think this is such a great board, and I'm so happy to be part of it. So with that, Director Moore, if you've still got some breath left in you, can you give us a concise update?
Yeah, I will keep it very, very short. Remember, every Wednesday, we're doing story time in the park, and I'm going to be going next Wednesday. The story time in the park occurs at Beresford Park. It alternates between Central Park and Beresford Park. We recently, and obviously you all will need to accept these gifts once they have been processed, but we recently received the second grant of the year from the San Mateo Library Foundation. I cannot say enough in honor of the foundation. At the beginning of this year, we all thought maybe that nothing would come through. So it's not just a comment on the foundation and its wonderful executive director who just did some serious heavy lifting. It's a comment on San Mateo's community. But we're about $5,000 less than a regular year total, which is amazing. So in a regular year, the foundation has traditionally or historically granted us about $300,000 in grants, and this year I think it was $295, which is nothing short of a miracle. The Fund a Need money from the FAN is dedicated to outreach. And this is something that people have been asking us to bolster and to do more of. And one of the things that I said was that in order for us to do more outreach, that we needed some funds to provide backing staff, to buy some more equipment that the main outreach people, which has sort of informally been taken over by Adriana until we hire a branch librarian. But at least for this year, we have some supplemental funds that we can use to pay some on-call staff to backfill so that we can send library staff out to do more outreach. This should mean a substantial boost to the number of outreach programs that we do this year. We also received another grant for the Business Resource Center from Franklin Templeton. And one of the things I'm especially proud of is our financial education work. It should be taught more in school. It should be taught more to all of us when we're younger, and it's not. And one of the ways that the library is filling the gap is we are providing specific programming for seniors looking to plan for their retirement, for seniors looking to have financial stability in their golden years. We are one of the few libraries that I know of that has specifically targeted youth finance programs. We are providing a real public education to anyone who wants to learn how to be more financially literate and how to be more confident in making these kinds of decisions and at least get their feet wet. So special thank you to the foundation for heroic effort this year to help us pretty much meet the regular goals, which is amazing in a regular year, but especially this year. And especially for putting their money where their mouth was and saying, okay, this is what you say you need to do more outreach, and providing us some support. We hope to have a more sustainable outreach program next year, but at least this is a bridge to allow us to get out there and do much more this year. Now we have a responsibility to do it.
Thank you very much. And with that, Executive Director Esselstyn, please give us an update.
Hi, how are you guys? Thank you, James, first of all. It is a delight to support this mission and bring this out to the community and see the response, because it means that they, even during a pandemic year when there are opportunities to actually visit the branches, which is sort of how one of the metrics that we use to see how engaged the population is with us, they couldn't come all the time. They still cared about what was going on. So it was with great pleasure that we made this grant last week or the week before. It was $101,000, a few extra hundreds in there. We also have received and will be cutting a check just after the beginning of the fiscal year for the Franklin Templeton BRC grant. That's a renewal. But you should also know that our relationship with Franklin Templeton is really positive. It's up about $500 from last year. It's nominal, but we don't always have funders that will let us sort of slide the scale up as we need the money. And 2 years ago, it was about a $12,000 grant. So slowly but surely, we have really gotten them to take on the full cost, fully freighted cost of things like databases and other digital access, including for the last 2 years, and this year's about $250 more. The library has used some grant funding dedicated to purchasing ebooks, which, as you know, during the pandemic were very accessible and very important. And there's a real interest there. So we were very happy to receive that funding as well. All wonderful news there. I do want to make a quick note and notice the transition here. Lisa, it has been an absolute delight to have you as our board of directors representative from the Library Board of Trustees this past year. You made an excellent contribution in a year that was unlike any other. Whenever these happen, and they do annually, I always have to say, at least I know you're not going very far. So, our meetings are essentially open to all of you. I hope that, Lisa will continue to stay involved with the mission of the foundation. And Liz, I'm delighted to be able to work with you officially again. You were talking about the collaboration committee. Liz and I had many a powwow in past years, so you'll get to even spend more time thinking about whether or not that should be revived next year, or at least finding out what the rest of the board is thinking. Lots of things to consider. In terms of our board transition, Sunil Panda will be continuing on as our board president. Terry Garnick is our vice president. Gary Sprague will also be continuing as our treasurer, and we have not yet locked down who our secretary is. It's currently Shelley Goldberg, but she would like to have a different role. So we're identifying somebody. For that, we also invited 4 new board members to join, all of whom made terrific contributions in the last year or two, especially this last year, helping us do our fundraising gala. So unbelievably, we are finally welcoming Diane Irvin officially to the foundation. She has served in just about every other supportive capacity that you can as a community member for this library. So I am very, very happy to give her this final feather in her library loving cap. Jeannie Back, Alexander Gillen, and Suzanne Sims are also joining us as new board members. So their terms begin July 1. The board will not, though, however, meet in July. They're taking the month off. So our first meeting will be in August. And Liz, I will make sure that you get all of the information that you need. The only thing I will tell you is that we are continuing to meet remotely. If the library does not extend hours again all the way to 8 or 9 p.m., that's likely going to require the board to undertake a revisiting of our schedule, because typically we had met in the evenings and sometimes our meetings would go past 7:30 or 8. So we'll be discussing that. But for the moment, until we can start reserving the large conference rooms and people are comfortable coming back, we will be on Zoom. And let me think. I think that's it. I'm in the process of working on Library Link. So that will come out this summer. And then before you know it, we begin the fall appeal. So never a dull moment in Library Foundation land, but I am looking forward to a nice July, and I hope all of you are too.
Thank you so much. Incoming President DeWinter.
I have nothing new to report.
Okay, and incoming Vice President Hill.
Just briefly, I've been meeting with the senior task, San Mateo Senior Task Force, Friendly City Task Force, and that's been very interesting. And I'll share some ideas at our next meeting.
Thank you very much. Trustee Chen,
Nothing to report.
and Trustee Lynn Harris.
Nothing to report.
Okay, and for my part, the only thing I would like to put on for future agenda topics, number one, I totally endorse Director Moore wanting to focus on the fine. Do we or don't we eliminate fines? I think that's critical to the operation of the library. So that would be something I would request at a future meeting. And then number two, to focus on, to sort of upgrade the priority of our art donation policy, because there have been some items that have come in and there are some items that are under consideration where an updated policy is going to be necessary and supportive, and also reconciling our policy with what the city does in terms of art donations, I think would be important. So with that, I will bring it to a close. And does anyone else have, Dina, is there anything that you would like to contribute? No? Okay, even muted, you say no. Okay. All right, then I would like to thank everyone for a great meeting. Enjoy what remains of your evening, and thank you for being great colleagues. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you,
Likewise.
everyone. Much appreciation for a great
Thank you.
discussion.
Fantastic.